Hello, and welcome to the 11th episode of my paint and pigment making series. This time, I'm trying to make a paint and dye out of turmeric, so let's get straight into it. I got a little bit deep down the rabbit hole when it comes to the dye part, so if you're interested in only that, just skip to this time. Here I have some turmeric, which was ground from the root, and that'll come into play later because I realized that there's another type of turmeric, also known as curcumin, but I'll try not to get ahead of myself. So here's the ground root, and it doesn't look as smooth and fine as I would ideally like, but I go ahead anyways and place it on my glass slab, add some walnut alkyd, and see what happens. Turmeric absorbed the medium and the particles swelled up. This made sense because turmeric is oil soluble, and I ended up with a chunky paste that doesn't really resemble paint. You usually want your pigments to be insoluble in oil, so that instead of absorbing it, they become suspended in it. It doesn't look good at all, but I'm going to try it out on some primed, unstretched canvas anyways. I really like the color it leaves on the canvas, but the particles are way too big and it's horrible to apply, so this really isn't going to work. This is when I realized that there is a turmeric spice and then there is curcumin. I always thought they were the same thing, but it turns out that curcumin seems to be a more concentrated version of a material or a chemical that's in the actual root. So I went and bought some of that. It's for sure much more fine than the ground root and also much more of a brighter yellow. It definitely creates a smoother paste than the ground root, but it's still not ideal. It's no fun to apply, but it's much better than the root and has more of a vibrant color. As for permanence and color fastness, I totally forgot to take progression pics, but here's a little comparison between week 1 and week 10. Definitely some color change there. Now for the last thing, I know that some of you watching this are into textile dyeing and using the stuff as a dye might be interesting to you. So let me preface by saying that although I come from a painting background, I have zero training or education in dyeing textiles. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I know how to make dyes, but I don't know how to use them. I just know that you're meant to dip the textile in a mordant such as alum and then dip it in the dye so that the color sticks. I add a teaspoon of curcumin to the dye and hope for the best. I filtered it out and was left with a pale and dull solution. That's kind of a really bad sign. At this point, I went online and dug around for more information about turmeric solubility. This article here pretty much confirms that turmeric is insoluble in water and is only slightly soluble in hot water, and that's actually a pretty big problem. It means it would just be washed away and wouldn't really adhere or penetrate the fibers of whatever you're dyeing. I don't think turmeric would have the permanence required, but I could be wrong since, like I said before, I'm not an expert. I did accidentally spill a bunch of turmeric water on my canvas table though, and it looks super cool. For some reason, it's really red in some areas, which is pretty amazing. And when I rub some alum on it, it turns yellow. It turns out that acids create a brighter yellow in the turmeric, which would explain the reaction to alum, which is very acidic. It also turns out that alkalis make it a red, burnt orange color. It also says the orange color would last longer without fading than the yellow one. and that's pretty useful info actually. I'd imagine getting any soap or detergent on the dyed textile would change it to orange though. I started to think turmeric would make at best a finicky and at worst a bad dye, but Google Images seems to really disagree with me. I mean, that looks great. I went through a bunch of tutorials for dyeing things with turmeric, and while the pictures look awesome, the authors almost always admit that that's how it looked like before it was washed, and that it was faded dramatically after the first wash. Pretty clickbaity. The comments are also full of people who've never tried it, but the ones who have also said that it faded. I also saw that a lot of the tutorials use salt or vinegar as mordants, and is that right? Any experts out there? I do know though that vinegar should never be used with cotton. Doesn't seem that that would work so well, especially if you're using modern soaps and detergents on those textiles afterwards. So, to conclude, I believe the problem with turmeric is that it's insoluble in water, therefore you can't make good inks, dyes, or watercolors out of it. They would just not be pigmented enough. On the other hand, it's oil soluble, which rules it out for oil painting. To get the most out of the pigment, it would probably have to be with an acrylic binder, because I don't really see any other method working better than that. I leave some links for tutorials that seems legit. If you try them out, let me know how it goes, but to me it doesn't really seem worth it. Anyways, I hope that any or some of that was useful. Remember to leave any questions or suggestions below, and thanks for watching.